do the tutorial, and I might highlight different things. We shall see. But the tutorial is generally very, very good. So under the malign influence of Qian Qi, rebels from the mines of Nanyan approach with hostile hearts. They are Fate Weaver's puppets to ensure strife as he attacks through the Great Bastion. Not that this exonerates such disobedience. They must face the dragon's wrath. And the breach that is being talked about is here. So you can see that the gates have been smashed, the Great Bastion has been breached, and there is an army belonging to one of Tzeentch's puppets in the terracotta graveyard. So that is going to be one of the first things that we're going to have to deal with, because we are in charge of guarding the Great Wall, and the Great Wall has been penetrated. So if we complete the Engage the Enemy mission, then we'll gain some money, and we'll also recruit a free hero, the Astromancer, which we were talking about earlier. Astromancer, not astronomer, nor astrologer. Astromancer. There we go. Got it. There was something else I was going to point out here, and I've totally forgotten what it is. Oh yes, I remember. At the start of the game, there will always be this mission. This is very, very standard. It is just so that you can basically get an idea of how your armies fight. It is usually a very easy fight. You can generally handle it without many issues. But it's a good way of learning the capabilities of your different troops, learning the special abilities of your main lords, and just giving you an idea of how things are going to go. So if we select Miao Ying, we can then see this panel down here. This is showing off the troops that she has in her army. So at the far left, always at the far left, we have Miao Ying herself. This is the lord, this is the general, this is the person in charge of everybody else. And then going to the right of that, we can see the different unit cards denoting the different types of units. So we've got one of these guys. This is a Celestial Dragon Guard, which we can see up there. And if this panel ever does not appear, by the way, you can open it by... There's a way of opening and shutting that. Or maybe that's only in battles. I think that's only in battles. But you can also pop open the abilities, so you can see precisely what those abilities do. And if you hover over those abilities, you get a tooltip which will open and tells you what they are for. So for example, the Celestial Dragon Guard, I can tell you, is an incredibly high-level unit for Cathay. They are very, very strong close combat infantry. They have shields, which you can see here denoted by the little shield next to armor. That means that they have a resistance to missile attack, so 35% of all small arms missile fire, so that's anything that's not artillery or magic, will block 35% of that. The colour of the shield denotes the strength of this ability. So it goes from bronze, which is what they have, to silver, which I think is a 50% resistance, to gold, which is like a 70% resistance. Gold ones are incredibly rare. Bronze are the most common. Then we can also see their other stats. So leadership is their morale. It's how likely they are to break and run in a fight. Speed is how fast they move. So 28 is actually very, very slow. Celestial Dragon Guard, because they are so heavily armoured, 95 is a lot of armour, means that these units move very slowly. Melee attack of 34 is their chance of hitting someone. Melee defense is their chance of being hit in close combat. Weapon strength is how much damage they do whenever they hit, the amount of damage done by the blow. Now, it is important to hover over this because it will give you a lot more information, and that is primarily this base weapon damage, armor-piercing weapon damage, and bonus versus large. So the number shown there is always going to be the combination of your base weapon damage and your armor-piercing weapon damage. They are cumulative, and you can see that 25 plus 11 equals 36. The bonus versus large is anyone that is a large size unit. So you can see the size of the unit with this icon here. So if it's a small person, it's a small unit. If it is a large unit, like this guy, it will show a very large piece. So bonus versus large, so if the sky junk wasn't flying, then the Celestial Dragon Guard would do an extra 20 damage. So it would go to 56 instead of 36. That is a pretty significant increase. And you can see the icons to the left of this will give you a bit more detail. So armor piercing, which means that the ratio of armor piercing weapon damage versus base weapon damage is increased. Armor piercing ignores armor. Doesn't matter how much armor they have, it just goes through it. And then the base weapon damage is reduced by their armor rate. So if they're armor piercing, that means they're going to be very good at cracking open enemies with big armor. Then the other stat is the bonus versus large. This is just to say that they have that bonus versus large creatures, which you can then see factored in here. The bonus versus large can differ unit to unit, so it's good to familiarize yourself with that. And then we have the abilities. So the important one for this unit is the expert charge defense. When bracing, this unit negates the charge bonus of any attacker. So very often you'll have charge defense on spear units, which these guys probably have. That means that they negate the charge bonus if they're bracing from a cavalry unit. Now, if they are braced in combat, you'll see a little shield appearing above their unit card. That means that they are stationary, they have their spears stuck in the ground, and they are ready to resist that charge. If they are not braced, which basically means if they're moving or fighting something else, then they will still take that charge damage. One of the nice things about Warhammer 3 versus the previous Total War games is the fact you can actually denote if a unit is braced graphically. Formation attack, that just means they'll try to keep in their formation. They hide in forests. They charge reflect. So not only do they reduce or negate the charge damage done by charging units, they will actually reflect a portion of that damage back on them. So they are really good against charging units. And then they have Battle Harmony of Yang. We'll talk about that when we're in the fights themselves. But generally units will be assigned Yin or Yang, and then they will give a bonus to the other... Oh no, they'll get that bonus if there's a Yin unit nearby. So for example, if this peasant archer was stationed near to the Celestial Dragon Guard, they would be buffing each other and they would both benefit from the Harmony buff. Does unit scale have a big effect on the gameplay? I was confused because it was under video options. Good question. Unit scale is effectively how many troops are in each of the units, or how many models will appear on a battle. I think I have it on Ultra. I haven't actually checked that, but I'm pretty sure this is Ultra. Which means that my armies are going to be very, very big. There are some elements which might be determined by unit scale, so I have heard, for example, that Lords and Heroes might be stronger if you have a low unit scale. But I feel like that wouldn't really matter because the number of hit points would still be shared across the unit. It just means that with 100 units, the hit points are shared over 100, whereas if you have, say, 70 on a large unit, then I think you would still have the same amount of hit points. So I don't think it necessarily affects it. It's just how strong is your video card and how epic do you want the battles to look. That's honestly the main thing to worry about. Gotta say, the prologue of this game is great. I've been really enjoying it. The prologue is really good. I was looking at the global achievements, actually, of my account versus other people, and apparently I played through the prologue before achievements were unlocked, so there's like a whole bunch of the most common achievements I just don't have. But then there's some really, really rare ones which I do, like fight 25 siege battles. Most people just haven't had the time to do that yet. Hit points is not shared between unit sizes. Oh, interesting. So yes, there may well be some differences, but generally play on the highest unit size you can, because you want that epic feeling. This is Total War, not Total Little Armies. Anyway, so going through the rest of our unit roster, we have Jade Warriors. Now, Jade Warriors for Cathay are your standard frontline infantry. These are the guys who stand up front, take the bulk of the enemy attacks, and hold their position. They have got 80 armor, so we can see the Dragon Guard of 95. It is higher. 80 armor is already really high. Like, Jade Warriors are very, very strong for their tier. They are incredibly tanky and very difficult to take down. Similarly to the Celestial Dragon Guard, they have also got shields. It is the same quality. It is bronze. Their leadership is a little bit lower, and this is one of the useful things you can do. So if you have the Jade Warriors selected and we just hover over the Celestial Guard, you can see these numbers appearing on the side. That is the difference between those units. So you can see that the Dragon Guard have 120 more hit points, 15 more armor, 8 more leadership, speed is the same, 10 more melee attack, 7 more melee defense, 8 more damage, and then 2 less charge ability. So that is very useful if you're trying to compare. So if we wanted to compare to the Peasant Long Spearman, for example, we can see the Spearman actually has more hit points, but then less of pretty much everything except for speed. They're unarmored, they're a lot quicker. So again, going to the Jade Warriors, they have the Harmony ability, they have Defensive Stance, which means if they are not moving, so if they're just standing still, they have a 10% charge resist, and if they're standing still for more than 10 seconds, then they will have 25% charge resist and also 10 extra armor. So that 80 armor will go up to 90 with the Defensive Stance. So generally, Cathay is a turtle faction. They will set up a formation at the beginning of the fight, and then sit in that formation, come what may. You'll usually have a line of close combat infantry in the front. You'll have your range, like your archers, your gunners, just behind that, artillery just behind that, and then you'll use your artillery to provoke the enemy to attack you. Say, if you don't attack me, I'm just going to blow you up because my cannons are flipping great. So you're very much a World War I type faction. You want to dig in and hold. They have hiding in forest, so if they're in forest then they can be hidden. Formation attack, and then resilience. Resilience means they are immune to the Dragon Emperor's Wrath, which is one of the compass abilities, which we'll talk about in a minute. Peasant Long Spearmen. So these are a basic low-level unit. At the beginning of the game, you'll probably be using quite a few of these. In the mid-game, you'll be switching to Jade Warriors, and in the late game, you'll probably switch to Dragon Guard. Miao Ying is nice because she starts with some of the very high-tier units, the Celestial Dragon Guard and the Sky Junk. Every Legendary Lord will have this. There are 1 or 2 units that they favour, that they start with, which you wouldn't ordinarily be able to recruit. You kind of want to try to keep those guys alive if you can. Anyway, the Peasant Long Spearmen, very lightly armoured. 15 is basically nothing. They have low leadership. They're faster, very, very slightly faster. And in fact, generally Cathay are a very slow faction. I'm just realising now just how slow. 20 melee attack, 24 melee defense, which if you compare to the Dragon Guard, is 14 lower for the attack and 19 lower for the defense. You can really see the difference in tier right there. They do 25 damage. They also have the bonus versus large. So if we hover over that, we can see that their bonus versus large is 17. Still pretty good. Like, they have long spears. Hence, you know, long spearmen. But it's not as good as the Dragon Guard, who have a plus 20. And then they have a charge bonus of 3. So whenever you charge, you basically add the charge bonus to your damage. The higher the charge bonus, the more damage you do with that initial impact. So Peasant Horsemen, for example, are built for charging people. Next up, we have the Celestial Dragon Crossbows. These are basically the same as the Dragon Guard, except they have crossbows. They can shoot stuff. So in addition to the other stats which the Guard have, and you can actually hover over and see if there are any differences. So the Guard have more leadership, they're less likely to run away, they are slower, they have more melee attack, more melee defense, because that's their role. They're supposed to be fighters. They do a bit more damage than their charge bonus. But the crossbows, they have ammunition, 27. So that is increased by 20% because we are in Miao Ying's faction, the Northern Provinces. They have a range of 160, which is decent. And then they have a missile strength of 29. And again, if you hover over this, you can see what the differences are. These are crossbows. This means that they're going to have a decent armor-piercing missile damage, which is denoted by this symbol right here. They're armor-piercing. So you generally want to have your crossbows shooting at armoured units and then your archers shooting at the unarmoured guys. And then they do 5 regular damage, so the rest would be wasted. Well, sorry, not wasted. Usually the armor pierce is just lower. So you'll have some units have really high base missile damage that can obliterate low armor units, but if they come against armor, then their damage is going to drop off heavily. These guys also have Battle Harmony. Now, these are Yin, as opposed to the others we've seen previously, which were Yang, which means if we have a Yin unit near a Yang unit, then their reload skill, which is how fast they can shoot, and their leadership will be increased. They hide in forests, and they are resilient. Then we have the Peasant Archers. The Peasant Archers are similar to the crossbows. We can, in fact, hover over, so we can see that in fact, let's do that, so we can really see their stats. Peasants have less hit points, less armor, less leadership, slightly more speed, and in fact the Peasant Archers are the fastest unit we've seen so far. 3 faster than the Long Spears. Less melee attack, less melee defense by a lot. Like, low tier archers will get obliterated if they ever get attacked by enemy units. So you want to make sure that you protect them with some infantry or some, close combat units nearby. Low weapon strength, low charge bonus. They have ammunition, 26. They have a range, 140, which is 20 less than the crossbows. And then missile strength of 15 instead of 29. Now, if we hover over that missile strength, they are not armor piercing. They only have an armor piercing of 1, which means these are dreadful against enemy armored units, but they're okay against unarmored. Then we have the Peasant Horsemen. This is our only cavalry unit, and you can see that because they are very fast. 90 movement speed compared to the others, although I will say actually 90 for a cavalry unit is, you usually want to have about 100. If you can. Not all factions have that. Like, this would basically put them in the medium cavalry type area. If it's 70 to 80, they tend to be heavy cavalry. If it's 80 to 90, then they're medium cavalry. And if it's 100, then they are light cavalry, or just like anti-cavalry cavalry, which do exist. They're like lancers. So they have a melee attack, they have melee defense, weapon strength, and charge bonus. And that charge bonus is important because, like I said, it will increase the unit's melee attack and damage for a couple of seconds after that initial impact. Now, I don't offhand know how many seconds that is, but I do know it is a couple. They are Yang, so they want to be near a Yin unit, which is going to be difficult because cavalry tend to work on the flanks or behind the enemy, which means they won't necessarily be around your army. Just make me think, actually. Does Cathay have any horse archers? I don't think they do. They are expendable. Now, expendable is an important trait because this means that ordinarily, if you have one unit of friendly units, friendly soldiers, and then another unit of friendly soldiers, and the second unit takes a catastrophic amount of damage to the point where that unit is basically dead, then the leadership of both of those units will be reduced. They can see the, oh, we're taking friendly losses, this isn't going well. If it's an expendable unit, then the guy next to them goes, don't really care. So expendable units you can really throw in as meat shields, and I think that the peasants, the peasant spears also have expendable. They can hide in forests. They are vanguard deployment. Now, vanguard means when you're deploying your army, there are two areas that you can deploy in. One small, one bigger. These guys can go in the bigger one, which means you can get them closer to the enemy and sometimes even around the flanks from the start. We'll talk about that when in battle, though. And then they are resilient. You know what? We never actually talked about your special abilities. Yang. Charge reflections. They have the similar thing to the Celestial Dragon Guard. Formation attack. Expert charge defense. Oh, it's expert, so it's against everyone. There is a difference between expert, which is anyone, and then charge defense, which is just cavalry. And then finally we have the Sky Junk, probably one of the coolest units that Cathay have, in particular Miao Ying. She starts with it. This is an incredibly high level unit. It is a hot air balloon with a rocket launcher. Yeah, you heard that right. It has a rocket launcher. The important thing here for these guys is the ammunition range and missile strength. You can see their missile strength is massive compared to the others. This is an artillery piece, and artillery for Cathay are massively strong. It also has a really, really long range. And it's flying, which means it doesn't have that weakness that most artillery do, where they have to worry about enemy cavalry units flanking them. Skyjunk doesn't care. The only thing the Skyjunk worries about is enemy missile units. It wounds, so if an enemy has less than 25% health, and you can see that with the enabled if, then it will inflict this hex, which is it will reduce the enemy base weapon strength, the enemy armor-piercing weapon strength, and the speed of the enemy unit. It is the Eye of the Dragon, which means it has 100% more spotting in forests, so it will be able to see if anyone is hiding in forests, because it's up above, it's a recon unit, and it has a bit of extra leadership. Oh, that's an augment. That's to everyone in the area. No effect range. So as long as you have a Skyjunk, your entire army has double forest spotting. That's pretty cool. I didn't realize that was everyone. I thought it was just them. They're always flying. These guys cannot land. There are a lot of flying units in this game. For example, Pegasus or dragons, which fly and then they land to fight on the ground. Skyjunks don't. They are entirely up in the air and they're entirely ranged. They don't suffer Dragon Emperor's Wrath, and then they have the Skyjunk Bomb, which is a bomb that they can drop 3 times. It is a very small area of effect, and it means you have to fly right over the top of the enemy army, which, considering you're an artillery piece, isn't necessarily always the thing to do. But if you have used up all of your ammo, then sure, you can turn it into a bomber. The other thing, which is not actually mentioned here, which is a bit weird, is the Skyjunk has a bunch of snipers in the main passenger area. So even though it's firing off a rocket launcher, it also has snipers up in the top that will randomly shoot at enemy units nearby. And they have no ammo limit. So even if you run out of rocket launcher ammo, this thing is still popping shots away. Just not nearly as many. Wound applies to self. No, it's a hex. Hex is always against enemies. Always. Okay, and then finally we have Miao Ying and all of her abilities. So 70 armor, 90 leadership, 46 speed. She's very quick actually, especially when she's in humanoid form. 65 melee attack. Now, what's this mean? This means she does magical attacks. There are some units which will have low armor but a natural damage resistance called physical resistance. Magical attacks will bypass that physical resistance. So if you're fighting against like ghosts, which will have a 50% physical resist, which means they resist 50% of all attacks, she ignores that. So she can just stab them anyway. Melee defense 55, weapon strength 430, and then charge bonus of 50. She is very good when storming into enemy units. The other thing to consider is this, the Harmony Amplifier. So if she is nearby units which are gaining the Harmony buff, and this is a special mechanic for Cathay, so it's important you understand this, then you can see that leadership +6 goes up to +12. With that 100% buff which Miao Ying provides, it means that any unit that's getting this battle harmony has their buff doubled. So they would be getting the +12 leadership and the +12 melee defense. That is a huge increase That means that they would have 55 melee defense, which for just a regular soldier, not a hero, is massive. It is really, really high. So you want to be making sure that you can make use of this battle harmony wherever possible. And this is one of the choices you have to make as the dragon. Miao Ying is a dragon. She can convert from humanoid form, which is her standard, into dragon form. Dragon form means that she can hit really hard. She's a freaking dragon. She can fight good. But then she loses the harmony amplifier. So do you use her as a general, buffing the rest of her army? Or do you use her as a flipping dragon to take down enemy units? It's a choice you got to make. Okay, and then we have all of the abilities. Wrath of the Storm, Transformation of the Dragons. That is her conversion into a dragon. Wrath of the Storm is an area augment, which will give magical attacks to everyone within 35 meters of her, and also increase their melee attack. So again, that's one of her like general abilities. She starts out with 2 spells, Earthblood, which is a heal, and Storm of Shadows, which is a speed debuff, so she can reduce the movement speed of people marching in on her army to give her ranged units and artillery more time to shoot them. She is a siege attacker, which means she can attack gates, and means she doesn't need to wait for a siege to occur. She can just attack cities straight away. Resilience, we've seen. Encourage means that she has an aura around her, and she will increase the leadership of all units within that aura. She can hide in forest. Mastery of the elemental winds. This means for every spellcaster you have on the battlefield, the amount of damage those spells do is increased. So if you have 3, 4, 5 wizards, then each of those wizards will be buffing each other's damage up with Mastery of the Elemental Winds. That is another Cathay ability. She inflicts wounds just like the Skyjunk. Disdain of the Dragons. So enemy units in 35 meters of her reduce their melee attack by 8. And this is a duration unlimited. That's what that little symbol means, which means it's always on. So all units near her have -8 melee attack, which means they are less likely to attack. So not only is she buffing the melee defense through the harmony mechanics, she is also reducing the chance that enemies have to hit. She has a 15% missile resistance, which means 15% of missiles will just miss her, and then a spell resistance of 25, which means magical spells, not magical damage. There's a difference between the two as of Total War Warhammer 3, but spells will do 25% less damage to her. Okay, so that is enough talking about the army. We're going to go ahead and attack. So what we're going to do is we're going to left click on Miao Ying. This green shadow, the darker one, shows you how far you can move in one turn. You can see the green arrow pointing to where you're trying to go. I'm just holding down the right mouse button to bring this up so I can plan. You can see over here, this bar, that is the amount of movement she has left. So if she doesn't move, it's full, 100%. Then as you try to move somewhere else, that bar will go down and it will show you precisely how much movement you're using. This is very useful because if you hover over an enemy unit, you can see the mouse cursor, usually an arrow, turns into a sword to say this is going to affect battle. And we can see that this is going to use 58% of her movement. Sometimes it is a little bit difficult to see if you're actually going to reach an enemy unit to attack them. As long as this is green and not red, you will reach them. If it goes red, like this, they're out of range. You can't get there. And then the green arrow will then start to turn into a red arrow. Now, one important thing to say is there is this second green shadow. That is your force march radius. So, normal move, you can move and attack. That's in this dark shadow. Then if you use this, you can change your stance. This is basically what you're trying to do when you're moving. You can change to the march stance, which will increase your movement by 50%, which will allow you to reach out to the second shadow. But it means you can't attack stuff. It means you can't recruit stuff. It means that you are much less likely to see enemy ambushes. And if you get attacked, you can't run away. It is very dangerous to march near enemy units. But if you need to cover distance quickly in friendly territory, then you can use that stance to do so. You can ambush, which means popping out and attacking someone. You can raid, which means reducing enemy control, growth, and stealing some money from them. You can encamp, which allows you to recruit units anywhere. And you'll also increase your replenishment. We'll talk about all of these more in detail if we use them. And then channeling, which means you gain more magic. And sometimes it can be good. If you have a lot of wizards, then go into the channeling stance. You'll move slightly slower, but you'll be a lot stronger in fights. Anyway, we're going to go and do this attack. So we're going to hover over this. We're going to make sure we're in range. We are. We're going to just release the mouse button. And then we get this screen. Mastani, did I see your redemption? Name something. Mastani for the Skyjunk. Can I do that here? Remind me after the battle. So, what if you wanted to recruit for a siege battle? How would you do that? How do you mean, Galenus?